The tip this week is about tubular cast-ons, and the technique that I like to use the most is the one where you work a crochet chain and you use these bumps on the back of the little loops to pick up stitches. And when you use this technique, you generally have to pick up an uneven number of stitches, and I'm working a project right now where I need an even number of stitches, and you can always decrease once you're finished, but I just thought, well, to hell with that, I'm going to find a different way. And so this is how I do it, and I don't think it's the end of the universe. You go ahead, and if you've not used this technique before, I have lots of videos on doing tubular cast-ons, and you can look at those. But this is my favorite method because I think it produces the cleanest, tightest edge. And as I said, you pick up the loop, little bumps there, and there's one stitch, and then you do a yarn over. So I've got 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's as much as I'm going to do because I don't want to be working forever. And when you use this technique, you know that you have your chain with half the number of the total stitches you need. I always do a couple of extra. And when you've got your stitches picked up with the stitch in there and then those yarn overs, then what you do is you turn your work. Now you can see that I've got 1 here, so the yarn over is 2. The stitch I pick up is 3, yarn over is 4, and 5. And it's hard to deal with just a yarn over at the end, which is what would give me my even number of stitches. So what I find I have been doing lately is I have just made a yarn over on this needle. And so I've got my extra stitch here, and it's just a loop at the end. Now on the second row, after you've picked up the stitches, this is where you do a method that gives you the actual tubular part. And there are a couple of ways to do it. What you do is you work 1 stitch, you slip 1 stitch, and depending on the type of stitch, whether it's a knit or a purl, you hold the yarn to the back or the front. And in this particular instance, because I've got something that looks like a purl here, I'm going to go ahead and purl it. Now, that doesn't mean I have to. I could knit it just as well, but this kind of helps me remember. So I've got my little loop here, and I'm going to work the first stitch, and I'm going to purl it. And because because I've got that loop at the end, I'm going to pull it fairly tight. Now because that was a purl stitch, that means that I need to hold the yarn to the back for the knit stitch, and then I purl. And by the way, when you do this, you should use a needle size smaller because for the first few rows, because that's going to give you a neater tubular edge, and then when you're finished you can go and with the needle size you need. Now the last stitch I worked was a knit, or a purl on the wrong side, and so I'm going to slip this stitch, and I'm going to purl the next stitch. That was a stitch that I slipped on the last row. Slip that one, purl, slip, and purl. And that last stitch right here that I've just worked, that is the loop that I had. And you can see that it's fine now. It looks just like the other stitches. So that's a way that you can have this on an even number of stitches rather than on an odd number of stitches. Now again, the first 2 rows or the first 4 rows or 3 rows, however much you decide, is where you're going to be working the stitches and slipping. Whoops. And when you've finished with that, then you just work your regular ribbing, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. And when you get rid of this yarn, it gives you a nice clean edge. Now in the video, or rather in my blog post, I'll have some photographs of this so that you can see exactly how it's done. And again, if you're not familiar with the tubular cast on technique. I've got lots of videos on it. Just check the index for them.